It was supposed to be a fresh start. After years of bouncing from one rental to another, dealing with nosy landlords, and enduring the constant upheaval of moving for work, I had finally saved enough to buy my own place. No more shared walls, no more arbitrary rules, no more answering to anyone. Or so I thought. The house was perfect, a modest two-story home with a small backyard, nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was everything I had dreamed of, a place to call my own, where I could finally breathe and live on my own terms. But as I stepped out of my truck that sweltering August afternoon, sweat dripping down my neck, I had no idea that my dream was about to turn into a nightmare. That's when I met Greg. He introduced himself before I even finished unloading the last box. Middle-aged, with a beer belly straining against his polo shirt, Greg had the air of a man who took himself far too seriously. The HOA logo on his chest gleamed in the sunlight as he marched toward me, clipboard in hand. "Afternoon," he greeted, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Greg, head of the HOA board. Just wanted to welcome you to the community." I shook his hand, trying to be polite. "Thanks. I didn't realize there was an HOA here." His smile tightened. "Oh, we take great pride in maintaining order." He handed me a thick packet of papers. "These are the community guidelines. I noticed your moving truck is parked slightly over the sidewalk. That's a violation, but since you're new, we'll let it slide." I blinked. "You'll let it slide?" Greg chuckled, as if I had just said something ridiculous. "Oh, we annexed this street into the HOA last year. You're part of it now." His smile turned icy. "It's mandatory. Everyone here follows the rules." I took a step closer, my voice steady. "I don't owe you or your board a damn thing." Greg's friendly act dropped immediately. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, "you'll find things go a lot smoother if you just comply." I stared him down. "I'm not paying a cent." He exhaled, shaking his head. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he turned and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But Greg was just getting started. The next morning, I stepped outside, expecting a quiet day. Instead, I found a notice taped to my front door. Violation 1, unapproved mailbox design. Violation 2, overgrown grass. Violation 3, failure to register for HOA compliance. I barely held back a laugh. I had just moved in. My lawn was fine, and my mailbox was the same as everyone else's. I crumpled the notice and tossed it in the trash. Big mistake. By the end of the week, I had received 6 more violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. "Your porch light is too bright. Your fence color is not on the approved list." Then came the fake fines. $150,150,250, $500, each one demanding immediate payment. Things escalated quickly. One afternoon, I came home to find an HOA officer standing on my property, measuring my fence. I stormed over. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He didn't even look up. "Routine compliance inspection." I stepped in front of him. "Get off my property." "Not according to HOA rules," he said with a smirk. "Greg says otherwise." I clenched my jaw. I don't give a damn what Greg says. "Leave. Now." The next day, I came home to find a tow truck hooking up to my truck, an HOA order. I ran up to the driver. "Put it down." I pointed at my truck. "It's a damn pickup. That's not commercial." He just shrugged. "Take it up with the board." I didn't have time for this. I walked straight to Greg's house and knocked hard. This time, he didn't bother with pleasantries. "I warned you," he said simply. "You're done, Greg. I'm taking this to court." Greg chuckled. "Good luck. Our legal team is very well funded. And if I were you, I'd think twice before making enemies in this neighborhood." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Just after midnight, I heard footsteps outside. I thought it was an animal at first, but then I saw the shadows moving near my breaker box. Someone was trying to cut my power. I grabbed my flashlight and stormed outside, but by the time I got there, they were gone. I checked my security cameras, but the footage was too dark to make out faces. I knew what was happening. They were testing me, seeing how far they could push me before I broke. But they were about to find out I don't break easy. They thought intimidation would scare me. They thought I'd pack up and leave. But when they came back, they weren't ready for how I would respond. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, lights off, watching the security feeds. Every time a branch rustled or a shadow shifted, My fingers tightened around the 12-gauge shotgun resting across my lap. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared, and I was right to be. At 2:37 a.m., the motion sensor on my back porch tripped. Then 3 more. They were back. This time, they weren't just messing with my power. They were coming inside. I switched the monitor to my front camera. 2 more men were creeping toward my front door. They were coordinated. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my shotgun, flicked the safety off, and moved toward the hallway. Then I heard it, the doorknob turning. I raised the barrel, aiming directly at the front entrance. A soft click. They had picked the lock. The door inched open. I let them step inside, 1 foot, then another. Rack click. I stepped forward, just enough for them to see the silhouette of the shotgun barrel aimed straight at their chests. They froze. Last warning, I said, my voice low and steady. The one in front hesitated, then reached for something on his belt. I fired, not at them, just over their heads. They scrambled, tripping over each other as they bolted for the door. By the time I stepped onto the porch, they were already halfway down the street, disappearing into the night. But I wasn't done. I picked up my phone and called 911. This time, I wasn't waiting for them to come back. The morning after the break-in, I expected a call from the police. Maybe an update. Maybe even some arrests. Instead, I woke up to cops at my front door for me. 2 officers stood on my porch, hands resting on their belts. "Sir, we need to talk." I folded my arms. I already gave my statement. The taller cop, a grizzled guy with sharp eyes, sighed. "We're not here about that. Your HOA president filed a complaint against you. Says you brandished a firearm and threatened members of the community." I almost laughed. "You mean the armed men who broke into my house?" The officer exchanged a look with his partner. My grip tightened on the door frame. Official business at 2 in the morning with lockpicks? The second cop, a younger guy, glanced at his notepad. "He says they were performing a late-night compliance check." I stared at them. They stared back. Neither of them believed a damn word of it. "Do you have security footage?" the older cop asked. I set it on the porch railing, pressed play, and let them watch. Everything changed. The older cop rubbed his jaw. "Yeah, that's not a compliance check." The younger officer muttered under his breath, "Damn, HOA is out of control." The older cop shook his head. "Nope, but I think Greg's about to be." They left without another word. By noon, I heard shouting down the street. I stepped onto my porch just in time to see a different set of officers standing at Greg's door. Greg was red in the face, arms flailing. "This is harassment. You should be arresting him. He's a menace to this community." One of the officers held up a folder. "Sir, we have multiple reports of HOA overreach, trespassing, and fraudulent permit enforcement. We're opening an official investigation." Greg turned pale. I watched him try to argue, try to charm them, try to weasel his way out of it. But the moment the cops mentioned search warrants and subpoenas, his whole demeanor changed. The officers left, but I could already tell Greg wasn't smiling anymore. And I wasn't done yet. The law wasn't on their side anymore. They had overplayed their hand. And when I found out who was really behind it all, it turned this from a local dispute into something much, much bigger. I wasn't just dealing with power-hungry HOA nonsense. This was bigger. The moment the cops started investigating, I knew I had to dig deeper. So I did what Greg never expected. I started pulling records. I went to the county office and asked for any permits tied to my property. The clerk frowned, tapping at her keyboard. Then she looked up. "Sir, there are no open permits under your address." I wasn't surprised. "What about HOA filings?" Her eyes widened. "That's not right." She turned her monitor toward me. "Not real permits, fake ones. And each one had outrageous fees attached to them. Some homeowners had been charged thousands of dollars for permits that didn't exist. Their homes were flagged for noncompliance." That's when it hit me. The fines, the fake violations, the threats. This wasn't just about power trips. Greg and his HOA weren't just extorting people. They were stealing from them. I started calling other homeowners in the neighborhood. The stories were all the same. A woman 3 doors down had been forced to rip out her entire driveway because the HOA claimed it was non-compliant. They had all been scammed. And now, the entire neighborhood wanted blood. The local news caught wind of the story within 24 hours. Then the state got involved. Turns out, this wasn't just happening in our neighborhood. Greg and his cronies had been running the same permit scam in multiple communities, fake violations, forced removals, bogus legal threats, and millions of dollars in stolen fees. The district attorney launched a full-scale criminal investigation. Suddenly, HOA board members who had been loyal to Greg weren't so loyal anymore. Facing prison time, they flipped on him instantly. They turned over emails, financial records, and proof of everything. The scheme went deeper than anyone imagined. Greg was charged with wire fraud, forgery, racketeering, conspiracy to commit extortion, and multiple counts of trespassing and harassment. The entire HOA board was charged as well. Greg wasn't just facing a few years in prison. He was looking at decades. And the best part? Even after his arrest, his problems weren't over. The homeowners sued. A massive class action lawsuit was filed, demanding every stolen dollar back. By the time it was over, Greg lost everything: his money, his home, his entire reputation. And the neighborhood? Finally free. A few weeks later, I received one last letter. This time, it wasn't a violation notice. It wasn't a fine. It was a formal statement. The Homeowners Association for, redacted, neighborhood has been officially disbanded. No more fines. No more fake rules. No more Greg. I had moved into this neighborhood looking for peace. And now, I finally had it. The disbandment of the HOA brought a sense of relief to the neighborhood. For the first time in years, people felt free to live their lives without the constant fear of fines, threats, or unwarranted inspections. The streets were quieter, the lawns greener, and the air lighter. But beneath the surface, tensions still simmered. Greg's arrest had left a power vacuum, and not everyone was ready to let go of the control they once had. I thought the worst was over. I thought I could finally relax. But I should have known better. Greg's empire of corruption had been vast, and his arrest was only the beginning. The investigation into the HOA's activities had uncovered a web of deceit that extended far beyond our neighborhood. And while Greg was behind bars, his associates were still out there, angry, desperate, and looking for revenge. It started with small things. A broken window here, a slashed tire there. At first, I dismissed it as petty vandalism. But then the letters started arriving. Anonymous, handwritten notes slipped under my door or left in my mailbox. You think you've won? This isn't over. You took everything from us. Now we'll take everything from you. Watch your back. I tried to ignore them, but the threats grew more specific. One night, I came home to find my front door wide open. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. They had been inside my house. They wanted me to know they could get to me anytime, anywhere. I called the police, but without evidence, there was little they could do. The officers increased patrols in the area, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop until they made me pay. Determined to protect myself, I began digging deeper into the HOA's operations. Greg's arrest had exposed the tip of the iceberg, but I suspected there was more to the story. With the help of a few neighbors who had also been victims of the HOA scams, I started piecing together the puzzle. What we uncovered was shocking. The HOA had been part of a larger network, a shadowy organization that operated in multiple states, using HOAs as fronts to extort money, launder funds, and control entire communities. Greg had been a pawn in a much bigger game, and his arrest had disrupted their operations. Now, they were cleaning house. We found evidence of offshore accounts, shell companies, and connections to organized crime. The more we dug, the more dangerous it became. One of the neighbors who had been helping me, a retired accountant named Martha, disappeared overnight. Her house was ransacked, and her computer was gone. The police ruled it a burglary, but I knew better. A few days after Martha's disappearance, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was shaky, barely above a whisper. "You need to stop digging," the man said. "You're in way over your head." "Who is this?" I demanded. "Someone who knows what you're up against. They're watching you. They're watching all of you." "Who's they?" I asked, but the line went dead. The call left me rattled, but it also gave me a lead. Using the number, I traced the call to a payphone in a nearby town. I drove there the next day, hoping to find some clue about who had contacted me. What I found was a man waiting for me in a dimly lit diner. His name was Victor, and he had been one of Greg's enforcers. But after Greg's arrest, Victor had been cast aside by the organization. Now, he was scared and looking for a way out. "They're coming for you," Victor said, his eyes darting around the room. "You messed up their operation, and they don't forgive." "Who's they?" I asked again. Victor hesitated, then leaned in closer. The syndicate. They've been using HOAs for years to control neighborhoods, launder money, and silence anyone who gets in their way. Greg was just a small-time player. The real power is higher up. Victor's revelation changed everything. The HOA had been a front for a criminal organization known as the Syndicate, a network of corrupt officials, business leaders, and organized crime figures. They used HOAs to exert control over communities, extort money, and eliminate anyone who posed a threat. Victor agreed to help me take them down, but only if I could guarantee his safety. It was a risky move, but I didn't have a choice. With Victor's inside knowledge, we began gathering evidence, financial records, emails, and recordings of meetings. But the deeper we went, the more dangerous it became. One night, as I was leaving Victor's safe house, I noticed a black SUV parked down the street. The windows were tinted, but I could feel eyes watching me. I quickened my pace, but the SUV followed. I ducked into an alley, my heart pounding, and called Victor. "They're onto us," I whispered. "We need to move." Victor and I decided to take the evidence to the FBI. But before we could, the syndicate struck. Victor's safe house was raided, and he was taken. I barely escaped, thanks to a warning from one of Victor's contacts. With Victor gone, I was on my own. The syndicate knew I had the evidence, and they were closing in. I had to act fast. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, Sarah Mitchell, who had been covering the HOA scandal. Together, we planned to expose the syndicate to the world. But the syndicate was one step ahead. As Sarah and I prepared to release the evidence, we were ambushed. Men in black masks stormed the building, guns drawn. We managed to escape through a back exit, but not before Sarah was shot in the leg. Bleeding and desperate, Sarah and I made our way to a secure location. We knew we had one last chance to bring the syndicate down. With Sarah's help, I uploaded the evidence to a secure server and sent it to every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and government official I could think of. The response was immediate. The evidence went viral, and the public outcry was deafening. The syndicate's operations were exposed, and arrests began across the country. High-ranking officials, business leaders, and crime bosses were taken into custody. The network that had terrorized neighborhoods for years was finally crumbling. But the syndicate wasn't going down without a fight. In the chaos, they sent a hit squad after me. I was cornered in an abandoned warehouse, outnumbered and outgunned. But I wasn't alone. The neighbors I had fought to protect rallied together, forming a makeshift militia. We stood our ground, and after a fierce battle, the syndicate's enforcers were defeated. With the syndicate dismantled, the neighborhood began to heal. The scars of the past remained, but there was a newfound sense of unity and resilience. We had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger. As for me, I finally found the peace I had been searching for. The fight had cost me dearly, but it had also given me something priceless, a community that stood together no matter the odds. The HOA was gone. The syndicate was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.